I need to write because this page is the only place where my voice is heard, because in my own household, I was like background noise to my mother and her partner fighting. I need to write because in this page, my tears have been used as ink for me to write a truth and a story that will become a mural that strangers will stand up to admire and see that this artistry is really my pain. I need to write because I'm tired of using my arms to dodge smacks from people and the world. I'm tired of using my fingers to wipe tears away, so I've decided I'm going to switch the motion of getting rid of these tears and replacing it with a pen and writing everything I really feel, because I know in this household, everything I have to say goes unnoticed, and silence is the only thing I can afford. So I cash in every time, and I run to my room, and I've made friends with the lines because they've become the stage in which my words dance on, and which a place where all my pain has a home. I need to write. And I mean, I really need to, because here I sit at a dinner table, and the only thing I feel is unspoken pain and trauma that was passed on to me because my mother never wanted to let me go. So I need to write. And I mean, I really need to write because when I step out of this house, my skin tone is been posted on flyers saying wanted, and everything that is my body is a prison bar, and all the things about me that are truthful have been used against me. And I, as a Black woman, have to stand on a stage screaming to be heard, and everybody wants to cash in and be a witness to my pain, but nobody wants to help me heal. So I need to write because when I turn outside, my voice is like comedy to people. I am the stereotype. I'm the thing you laugh at when you say, yeah, Black people really act like that. So I need to write. And I write like every letter on that page is a scar that my stepfather gave me, and I bend them into letters, and I paint pictures and allow people to admire what was once my own blood. I need to write. Because this page is my rescue. It is the boat I will sail all my trauma on and send it away. I need to write because this page is the only place I've ever found comfort. I need to write because I know when I speak, people stop listening and start timing me because they want to know when I'll be finished because the truth hurts. And I know when I speak, my voice feels like pieces of razor blades in an audience full of people that tell me what you say I've already heard before from another Black woman that came on stage just before you, so you're going to say nothing new to me. I need to write because this page is my stage, and these lines are the platform which my truth takes on life. This is the place where my trauma rests. This is the place where I feel valid because I get to be the master of when this pen reaches the paper. Because outside, I'm just another statistic who might never make it, and I'm the exception when I'm in a room full of white people who can say a bunch of big words because they don't know I'm intelligent enough to know that shit because I deserve to be here. Matter of fact, I don't need to write. I want to. I don't want to speak. I want to be heard. I want the audience to know that everything that I spit out came with tears before these words, and all these pictures that I'm painting that now you can admire with one scars and lashes on my body. I need to write because there is so much that was not said in my home that is still not being said in classrooms, that the world will still not give even 30 seconds to be on your TV screen. So I write. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Huda, and thank you everyone for gathering today. Thank you, Rosie, for organising this panel of incredible artists. We're here to unpack and understand the creative process a little further, having just watched a documentary film on the creative process for a group of slam poets. In the documentary we watched that process take place within a competitive framework that I was just chatting to the others and saying made me feel very anxious throughout that competitive tension between writing because you need to write, but writing because you want to win a competition. It seems something inherently kind of stressful about that for me. Huda, are you familiar with the slam process? Have you written in that competitive sphere before?
Yeah, I was an open mic lover at first, because that was like the only thing, you just got there and you shared your truth and you just left. Like, people clapped great. If they didn't, you just left. It was fine. And then I did my first competition, and I was being graded for my truth. And even worse, in poetry settings, it's people who, like, anyone is a judge. So you just walk in there like, yeah, your opinion matters. He goes, and you're like, oh my God. Like, it's terrifying. And there is the need, like, for me, writing has been healing. It's a part of my therapy. It's a part of, and then there was an enjoyment that followed. But there's also a thing like, if I want to do this thing that I love for the rest of my life, I got to win. And then integrity of why I write, to keep that momentum of like, I'm writing because I've got some things to share that I think the world needs to hear. But at the same time, those things may not always want it to be heard. Like I've shared Black poems in front of 150 white people. That's the reality of it. And in most cases, I should not win that. Because what I'm talking about, some people cannot relate to. You know what I mean? And it feels like I'm shooting at people rather than just sharing my truth. And that competitive world is hard because if you people saw the document, it is definitely you battling. Like, I need to share the story because I think it's relevant and I think it's important, but I also need to win. And entertainment value, performance strategies, it's a complex world that I am not a fan of, but gotta do it.
Got to do it, got to write. Your poem answered my first question beautifully, so we've just heard about why you need to write. Yeah. Let's hear from each of the other panellists first about why it is that you need to create and why why the form that you've chosen is the right one. So, Yolande, why do you need to express yourself through that physical art form of dance?
I think there are so many important stories that would otherwise sit in hibernation, untold. And I think that through art, art provides an amazing way for people to continue their learning journey, because I feel like our education system in Australia is sadly lacking in so many areas. Most of the works that I create, whether or not they're on an Indigenous company such as Bangarra or on another company such as the work I created earlier this year on Stompin in Tasmania, the root of my work always seems to come back to the environment and where our feet are planted and how we need to live in reciprocation and live sustainably and listen and reflect on what is around us. And yeah, I feel that there is a great need for this, and that is what underpins all of my work.
How does dance become the medium that expresses that urge, that politic for you?
I think the beauty of dance is that it can say so much, unlike all of you guys, without using any words. Dance is the first language that we learn to communicate with in utero. We're swimming in a pool of emotions, and we communicate with these emotions through our physicality. Prior to any cultural input, any educational input, the body is such an amazing vehicle that we're all blessed with, no matter what our so-called limitations are. Everybody can dance, everybody can communicate, whether it's with a look or whether it's with like a shape. Whatever it is, we use our physicality as a tool for communication innately, and I just think, I connect to that.
Thank you. Trent, in a sense, you're already a storyteller as a feature writing journalist. You're very good at telling other people's stories, but you've taken that turn to telling your story as a novelist. Can you talk why and how?
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that feature writing side. Like I'm 40 now, right? And at 40, I realise writing is the thing that makes my legs move. And but at 20, I didn't realise that. And at 20, I would go into people's houses when I started out in journalism, and I'd sit in their living rooms for like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, getting their life story, and like they'd be looking at their clocks going, when's this freaking guy going to leave? And but I realise now that back then I wanted to get that story because I was working out my own shit. And now I can look at that and go, yeah, I was just processing like all that stuff. And then only recently I realised, hey, there's an even better way to do that, and that's through a novel. And so that became extremely sort of powerful for me, and that's so why I write is two things. I am absolutely addicted to story. Anyway, like hearing these guys, I will tune in and go, take me to the end of that story. Watching that amazing movie, take me to the end of that story, and then boom, they took me to those places, and it was incredible. But also, I do have some very real stuff in here that I need to come out through here, and it's been really amazing to that process for me.
Great,
Yeah.
great. I'm going to unpick some. We'll take a step-by-step approach through those processes, but that's from Catherine's perspective as well as a documentary filmmaker. Why is that the art form that you've chosen to express yourself?
Well, I think I'm really different because I'm not the creative force. I find people who are creative, and I think my role is to document. And I think we're not doing enough of that in this country, and there's stories that need to be told that people mightn't get to Bangarra, they mightn't pick up the book, they mightn't hear your poetry, but television, even though free-to-air is going through a lot of challenges at the moment, I still think that's my role, is to take those stories and take them to as wide a possible audience, but also to document our artists of this time. So I think possibly, yes, there is a creative urge, but I'm not so much writing because I don't use narration. I let the voices, the artists, tell their own stories. So I'm just going along on that ride, really.
I'm going to disagree with you, I think you are a creative storyteller. I watched the Ben Quilty documentary that Catherine made yesterday, and it was a story. It's a story of Ben Quilty's creative process. You're still having to shape that. You're still having to...
Yeah, but I'm not writing it, and I'm not creating the dance. I think I pick my subjects pretty well, and they can tell their own stories. Ben is a very good storyteller himself.
I think you're still telling stories too. I want to start with inspiration then. And in each of the examples, or give me an example. Let's start and work backwards then. So Catherine, describe for me the moment when you went and within yourself said, I'm going to make this documentary about Ben Quilty.
When he said to me, I'm not going to let you film me painting in the studio. I don't want you in the studio. I said, okay, well, let's come to the studio and spend a couple of days with you. And he painted and we filmed and we talked and I knew therein lay a story, because to go in the doors of a studio, which is a very sacred space, and to have that trust and that access and to be able to follow paintings all the way through, that was a moment for me.
Yeah. Was there a moment when you, even before that, where you went, I want to talk to Ben Quilty and I want to have this conversation?
But probably I felt that too many people had already talked to Ben Quilty. But then I did think again, I think, yeah, they know about Afghanistan, or they know about what happened in Bali and his campaign to save those people from execution, but they hadn't really seen how he worked and his process and how he makes a painting, how he uses the paint. So if I could get that, I had a film.
Great. Trent, when was the moment where you you moved from I have this childhood, in Brisbane, which people tell me, my editor tells me would make a good story. But when's the moment where it landed within you?
Yeah.
And it became
Cool. Yeah, I'm hearing you. Yeah. Can I tell a quick story?
Yeah.
I'm big on story. I've got a couple of stories, but I'll try and make this really quick. But I was watching that, and it was just ringing through my ear, these moments in my own life where I'm kind of selling out and kind of creatively selling out. And so, my original dream, and still is, I want to be a screenwriter, right? I've written like 4 unproduced Hollywood feature films. And I won this short film competition once, and the prize was for the screenwriter, because we made this short film starring David Wenham. It was an amazing moment in my life, right? And the prize was, I love feature films and film, and the prize was you got to go to Hollywood, if you could get there on your own money. This amazing big-time Hollywood producer who produced a lot of those Will Smith movies, the Pursuit of Happiness type movies he did. You got a 1 hour sit down with him. That was the prize. And you could pitch him, like basically chance of a lifetime, pitch him your ideas, right? And so scraped up the money. I was probably getting paid 26 grand at Brisbane News at the time. And I went to LA for my big shot. And I had a week there, and I was freaking knocking on doors and just like... And then leading up to this 1 hour I had on the Sony picture lot where they filmed Lawrence of Arabia, and I got to sit down with this guy, Jason. I won't say his last name because he's a cool guy, but I'm about to say some funny things about him. He, I'm in there, and he comes. It was basically I'm this wide-eyed guy from Brisbane, right? And I'm in there, and I'm waiting in his office. His secretary knew all about it. And I'm in there nervously just going, here's my shot. This is like Eminem moment, right? This is like lose yourself. And this guy comes in, he goes, so who are you? And I go, I'm from Brisbane. I won a short film competition, and you agreed to the prize was I got to go talk to you about some of my film ideas. And he goes, he sits down on the biggest chair you've ever seen in your life, and he has a drink, and he goes, all right, shoot. And basically it was like, off you go, dazzle me. And I went, and I just threw him, like, I had like 20 pages of film ideas, really in-depth ones. And I went from my best to my worst, right? And it was like, so really in-depth ones from the heart and soul, like just incredibly deep things that I felt need to be put on screen, and incredible stories, that like amazing kind of treatments that I'd done. And he just like, nah, not gonna work, nope. And then I get to Chad the Impaler, this movie called Chad the Impaler. I'll quickly tell you what, I'm sorry, I'll try and, I know, because I want to hear more about these guys. But Chad the Impaler was a story about this American high school kid who, he was getting bullied at school, and so on a genealogy sort of family tree school project, he traces his family tree back to Vlad the Impaler, aka Dracula, and Dracula's still alive, right, because he's immortal, and he ends up coming over to like California or LA, wherever this sort of fictional high school was based, and I'm telling this producer this story, and basically Dracula and Chad, Dracula helps Chad sort of make it with the girls and sort of, become cool again and stuff. And then this guy, he goes, I love it! And I'm just going like, it's so cheesy and shit, right, that idea. And I fly home back to my wife and I go, yeah, he really loved Chad the Impaler. And he goes like, dead set. He's like, write it! And I wrote this, like, I spent like, days coming up with this really fleshed out script for Chad the Impaler. I'm just going, what am I doing? Like, there's just none of my truth whatsoever. Like, I don't know what American high school's like. I just know it from the TV shows I've watched. And it was just, I did that sort of thing for 10, 15 years, Stephen. Like, I mean, I'm telling you,
Pitching those ideas.
Pitching and just writing other people's ideas. And you know what? Like 2 years ago, I have all this stuff about this emotion, about when my mum went to Boggo Road Prison, and when I was raised by one of Queensland's most dangerous drug dealers, and my old man, who was just this wonderful drunk who raised us boys, and I said, that's a story, and maybe I should throw all that into this book called Boy Swallows Universe, and that's the freaking story that goes to Hollywood, and Hollywood start calling me, and it's like, that movie just is an example of that, and that's. Yeah, it was... Boy Swallows Universe was my chance to I was put on this bloody earth to tell that story, and just like those guys were put on this earth to talk about Black Lives Matter, it's like, that was my truth that I had to tell.
Do you remember the moment? Do you remember that moment when you went, I'm going to do this?
I remember watching The Block with my wife, and I said, I can't watch The Block anymore. and we had two kids, like, they're 12 and 10 now, they were 10 and 8 then. Put them to bed, like, kiss Beth, this beautiful girl who I start thinking about, right? I mean, I'll give you the truthful answer. I had this thought about how shit my life would be without them. And then I went, that is electricity that comes through the back of your spine and it comes into your fingertips. I went straight downstairs to their rumpus room, like where they play, and I got out my little Windows Surface Pro, and it was like, your end is a dead blue wren. And it was like, that book began.
That's great. Wow. That's great. The key word there for me was electricity, and it seems like that's the charge that we're talking about. There's this electromagnetic almost pulse that says this has to find voice. It has to find form.
Yeah.
Can you relate to that experience, Yolande, from your own practice, using one of your examples? So we were chatting earlier about working on Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu, a big responsibility there to take this increasingly landmark Australian work and to convert it into another form, from the written form to the dance form. Do you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah.
What drew you and what the moment of electricity was there for you with that project?
Well, my neighbour, who is wonderful, lent me the book, and I had just transitioned from being a dance artist with Bangarra for 16 years to coming back from maternity leave, and I was archiving all of Bangarra's history. And I'd finished reading this book, and I was thinking to myself, a lot of the works that Bangarra had done were all based on the truth of our country, but they all were wrapped in titles that honoured the hunting and gathering lifestyle. And a lot of the mob already know about the harvesting techniques and a lot of the different stories that are in Uncle Bruce Pascoe's book. But I thought at Bangarra we really needed some pieces that would help unleash his concepts. There are so many incredible stories within that book that need to touch people, need to reach people. People need to know about the deep history of our country. Our history didn't start 230 years ago. This country is ancient, and I like to consider the mythology as not mythology. They're amazing stories which are memorable. They've been turned in, these truths have been captured through creative non-fiction, ways of maintaining culture. They may seem like mythology, but they're actually truths that scientists can see parallels with the rising of the water and forming of cliffs and all different things in these stories. And so I'm constantly motivated to help communicate these ideas, and I use dance as a form to do that.
Great. I'm getting a sense of, again, that electricity, the urgency and the passion within you that's kind of resonating for you with that work.
Yeah,
well.
And I also feel that with our history, a lot of words have been lost or are hibernating, a lot of First Nations words, and there's no way to reproduce these ideas, these complex ideas in a single word through the English language, because we don't think that way. There's no way to craft those thoughts in a single word, such as the name I've been given in Northeast Arnhem Land is Wokalungal, which means the morning dew that gets caught in the spider webs. And there's a whole lot of unravelling within.
Name. That's amazing.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of. It's so intricately woven with the complexity of understanding environment. You've got the heat of the day and the energy of the land, and then you've got the cool air at night, which, that alchemizes into dew, while you've got the creatures busily spinning their webs and creating this magic, home to catch their food, and then it's also capturing the environment in it, and it sits there and, in one word, these are all ideas that are important for Northeast Arnhem Land Yolngu people. That's just one word. And so, I think that there's dances that accompany these words. There's a traditional Wokalungal dance, and it's woven within the complex songline of Northeast Arnhem Land people. And so I feel like dance is a way of communicating complex ideas which can't be held in the vessel of the English language.
As you're speaking and as I'm listening to you speak, I'm also watching you embody
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
you know, physically.
Yeah.
Thank you. Huda, your poem, beautifully and eloquently, I need to, just told us why it is that you need to write. And you also told us about that moment when your elder spoke to you and asked you the question. So is that typical for you, for the way how do other of your poems land as ideas in the first place within you?
For me, like, I lived in a very loud, big household where you had to be loud enough to be heard. So it was volume, like that got you the center stage and got you the mic. So you had to pick it up or you're just gonna go unheard. And as a child, it was the opposite for me. I wasn't interested in holding the mic. I had no desire to. If you didn't want to give me your attention, I didn't want it. I wasn't gonna fight for it. So I would go to my room and my pen would be my response. My writing was my response to the conversations, and I started to write stories where I was somebody completely different, where I could paint somewhere different for me, and I would have those stories, and I would speak them out loud, right? Now I would be in my room walking around, just like reading my script out loud to myself, looking like a crazy person, you know. But it was the process of needing. My pen was my weapon, right? And my voice became the expression. It became that allowing my words to have life breathed into them. And growing up, I had to fight to be heard. I knew that I didn't have a seat at the table. I had to bring my own, right? And it had to be a really good chair for people to make room for me, you know? And that was my artistry, right? And growing up, it was difficult. Like, my name is Huda, and it means guidance, right? And my mother named me that for a reason. So my father calls me Nur, which means light. And my mother, like on my birth certificate, says guidance. So my traditional name is Light of Guidance, right? So I was given a responsibility at birth to guide people somewhere. No idea where. No clue, okay? But it was a responsibility that I had. And I wrote a poem when I was 19 called Cleopatra. And the poem said, I have been given this crown that I'm not ready yet to wear the weight of. So I put it aside on my bed, and every morning that I awaken, I want it to be the first thing that I see, because it is the one thing I'm working the courage to put on, right? And it was I had a responsibility to my voice. I owed it to do something with it. And every time that I spoke, I felt like I was having a conversation with one person in the room. Like right now, I'm here to talk to one person. I don't know who that is, but I truly believe that if I have a conversation with one person in my truth, and I'm authentic in that I do it justice. And when I shared poetry and when I shared my art, I realized that my voice is a call to prayer. Like, simply put, not to toot my own horn, but like artistically speaking, my voice has the power to create stillness and create intensity, like I just did now. So, I learned the power of what I said and how that can impact or make people feel. I want to make people feel. And when I shared, the first time I had a conversation with my mom where I told her how I felt, and I painted a picture of how I felt. And I said to her, your words feel like acid burns on my arm, and no matter how many times I put bandages on them, there will always be a scar that reminds me that in that moment, you didn't love me enough to care about my feelings. That's where I sit. I sit in intensity in my truth. And every time I write a poem, I'm there.
Thank you. That's
no problem.
Beautifully put. And that triggers a question for me that I want to ask of all four of you. If you would indulge me and close your eyes. And would you place a hand over the part of the body or the part around your body that you feel that impulse to create comes from, that first moment, that electricity? Okay, and you can open your eyes and look at each other. 4 different places, the back of the head, the lips, the heart. That's interesting. So neuroscientists, according to my very dodgy and basic Google research for this session, of course, tell us that actually that impulse, that charge always comes from the brain. I want to just read you a quote about what neuroscientists say and see if we understand this and if we agree with it and feel it in our practice as well, because it seems to me that sometimes we're talking about something more metaphysical that science doesn't necessarily capture, but something emotional as well. So a neuroscientist would say that in all instances, creativity comes from our neurons, our brain cells. One set of, interestingly, they say it's unlike other functions in the brain, like speech, motor functions. The latest research seems to suggest that creativity doesn't actually reside or isn't generated in one particular part of the brain, which I didn't know. One set of neurons sense the environment, another group react to it, and there are lots of pathways connecting the two, tangled random networks which become the creative thoughts when 2 competing brain networks cooperate. So there's a default mode network which generates spontaneous thoughts. These are the thoughts that pop up that we don't censor, that come from impulse. And they communicate with the executive control network, which is central control, and it governs everything. So it's kind of the censoring, organising function. And apparently creative artists in scientific, I don't know how they determined this and how they measured it, but creative artists, while they are creating and involved in the act of creation, more of those networks are firing and are communicating and are cooperating than in other people. And humans have more of those networks than any other species. So I want to move to the next place. We've been inspired. I didn't bring my watch up, Catherine. Can I have a very quick look? Our hour is almost up. Okay, so the creative process, we've moved from instinct, we've moved from inspiration, and now we're going to start work on the project, right? We're going to. The writer Sue Wolf says that she describes this as a 2-part process. She calls the first step the lull. Which I had never heard of before, but I really liked it. It helps. I think I understand this as a writer. She says, the lull is a paradoxical state of attentive inattentiveness, akin to daydreaming, in which the writer silences the analytical, judgmental, form-making mind, so what we've just called the executive control. Creativity, the lull, is when that executive function has to take a backseat, and the default is allowed to be given full voice. So Ben Quilty described it really beautifully in your documentary. He didn't name it, but he said, up until now, I thought that this was procrastination.
Yes.
And so it's that
it
period.
Was a lull, the white canvases, the white piece of paper.
Yeah, not quite ready to paint yet, but I'm collecting the coal from Mile Creek. I'm gathering the images. I think of it as bower birding. Do you relate to that idea of the lull at all? Do you want to talk about how you do? Sorry,
I think probably over to Trent rather than me on this one.
No.
Well, no, because I don't. I mean, my process is collaborative. You know, it's not just me. You're sitting in a room, you're writing, and I'm out there with my cameraman. I'm there with my artist, and it is essentially a collaborative exercise. My lull comes when I come back with all my material.
Yeah.
Because I don't go out with a script.
Talk to us about that then.
So, you know, the ABC always want to see my script, and I don't have a script before I go out because
You don't
I don't know what the
storyboard.
story is. I don't know what the story is. How can I write a script? So I go out, and there's, you know, as I spoke about last night, it's an authentic process, I hope, where you're talking to the artist and the story evolves. Like, I didn't know he was going to paint Mile Creek. The film is about his painting of the Mile Creek massacre. I didn't know about Mile Creek. I didn't know the history, and we didn't know if he could actually get permission to do it. So how could I script that story until months into that negotiation or meetings with people, we could do it. So my lull comes when I come back and I've got reams and reams of material and interviews, and then I sit down and I find my way into the narrative that way.
That's great to hear. That's what we're...
It's artistic as hell.
So the research phase is part of your lull phase as well?
Yeah, I guess so. Look, the most exciting bit is when you do come back and you've got lots and lots of interviews, you've got an idea where you're going to start and you certainly know where you're going to end, but how that story evolves. But it is never scripted. And I fall outside of the convention in terms of, I guess, a lot of documentary filmmakers.
Great, thank you. 1 minute each for this, and I'm just going to marshal time a little more strictly now that I have looked at the watch. Trent, talk about that lull phase for you.
Yeah, lull, I'll say it quickly. The best lull I have at the start is between sleeping and waking in dreaming. Like literally, like I have a notepad beside my bed, and some of my best ideas have come, and answers to narrative blocks have come in that wonderful, you could call it a lull, but it's a wonderful creative space where your brain has slowed and all of your anxieties and all your questioning about being a cheap-ass writer falls away and your brain is taking over and going, you're actually pretty freaking cool at this. Go for it.
I'm going to agree with that one and follow up very shortly. I have a very similar process. Great. So it's this state of receptivity, a little like falling in love, right? Where every song you hear on the radio kind of is sending you a secret message that rings
and
true.
then that's so true. And then everything relates to the thing you're doing, and then the lull comes back like a sort of it's a poor analogy, but gamblers feel it when they hit the buttons on bloody bingo machines.
You are cortisol release.
You are just in the heroin haze, and you're writing a story, and that's where you want to get to. You want to be in that lull the whole bloody time if you can.
I relate to that very much.
Yeah.
Yolande, you're nodding. The lull process for a choreographer.
Well, before you step into the studio, you've done all of your research, and often it starts with, if you're telling a story that's from country, from a First Nation story, you've already been on country and you've spent time with people talking about what story you'd like to tell, and gaining permissions or altering what that story is accordingly. So you never really know what the story is going to be until you've had those conversations, and then the story is allowed to turn into itself. You know, it shape shifts into the dance. And when you move into the studio, you only have 6 to 10 or 12 weeks if you're lucky. We had 7 weeks for Dark Emu. And your blank page is the room and your 12 dancers sitting waiting for you to tell them what the story is and what your desires are and how you can communicate these really important stories. So you're there to inspire them to lose themselves in the story through movement, and you'll capture moments of that and pull it together. And if you start judging, it really hinders the process. It starts to unravel what's naturally, like the chemistry. If you can't analyse the chemistry while it's working, or it's goes
too
somewhere.
soon. It's not time for that yet. Yeah.
So you've got to let it flow, otherwise, because time's ticking.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's quite. They're not poles apart for those very different mediums. That's interesting. Huda, the poem's not ready to be written yet, but the idea's settling within you. Is that you're nodding? You were nodding to that idea of the lull. How does it work for you?
For me, space is a massive navigator. Like I edit in my room in complete silence with jazz music, but I don't write like that. So it's space. It's pictures I can create with random things that will later on become something. It's hard to explain, so I'll demonstrate. If I'm in a space like this and I'm just here and I'm like, I need to write a poem. I feel the urge to write. And I go, that white hat reminds me of the moment my stepfather gets home from work, and it symbolizes that now we're kind of together and there's something about a unit. And I know what color I want my walls to be painted. I want rainbows. I want pink everywhere, and I want green in that corner. I'm not sure if I even really like green, but I think I want to paint it. And I really like necklaces, but they make my neck itch. But my mom says they look cute because I'm built to be kind of girly, but I'm really not. And I build pictures and stories, and there's an empty space where all the conversations with the loved ones I wanted to have could sit there. And there's a camera where I want to be in front of stage, but I'm scared that what I have to say will not be understood. This is how I build pictures. So I just random things from random spaces that have no correlation to anything, and they just go on paper, and I go home and then I go, okay, cool. What did I like that I can completely dissect?
Yeah.
Like if I like her shirt, those colors become my story. That green becomes the ground that I walk on that feels like the door when I'm knocking on my ancestors to let them know I'm still here.
Yeah.
That's how I build poems.
Yeah.
I write from space.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it's very weird, but
you have just again uncannily anticipated the next question I have to ask.
I'm sorry.
Because you've described the process that Sue Wolf goes on to say is the second phase, right? So you move from the lull to the tight, what she calls the tightly construed phase, where you actually the executive brain has to come back in. She says the writing produced in the lull state appears to be formless, chaotic, and fragmented. But from here, the tight construing mind takes over. So we would say like the executive brain. So that's where you start to, from listening to your process, that's the next phase is where you start to have, it's the hard yakka, right? And you have to actually belt this thing into a shape that is not just formless and is not just intuitive.
Yeah, and the thing about being a poet is that a lot of people want to tie up everything in like almost a braid of words, and people get lost. Like when I'm in front of an audience and I have a super intricate metaphor and I just see people go, I lose them, right? And when I'm writing, after I've gotten those things, those cues from my environment, it's hard for you not to relate to me because I'm talking about your space. So for you to be a part of my story, like if I want to be a storyteller, it's about creating a circle full of people in which you have the instrument and people are following your rhythm, right? But if they don't know the beat, they can't go along. So the beat is your environment. You know this place. So I build on that of using things that are familiar to you, things that are in your space, that when I talk, when I say that hugs feel like the first time you step into water, the first time you feel an inkling of cold yet warm, and you start to get excited because the breeze makes every hair on your body stand up. I'm speaking your language. I'm speaking your body. I can't lose you. And it becomes about putting those things together. And I want to be able to walk like in front of a stranger and say a poem about a topic you have no idea about, but make you feel something. If I, as a black woman, can speak to a white man and go like, man, like my life is fucking hard. Like I'm a black woman who no one seems to think is beautiful sometimes. And I can tell you about that shit. And you get it? And you've never walked my life. I've done my job. So it's about constructing reality in like raw, painted, in colors so we can start to walk this journey together.
Creating a shared language that we mutually understand.
There's universal truth in everything. Art is universal truth. Body movement is universal truth. Language is that. When you listen to me talk, you're listening to my volume, to the pitch, to my silence, to the pauses. You watch me perform, and every single part of me speaks. So if you're a body language person, you're seeing my hands, you're seeing my energy. If you respond to sound, you can hear. That's why I'm not a writer, I'm a rider. You know what I'm saying? You gotta hear me. Like, you gotta see me. I'm an experience, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a whole thing. It's more fun that way for me.
You're a poet and a choreographer. I think you're all
I'm actually a
sections of
dancer,
each other.
funny enough. Yeah. So.
We'll just move quickly back to the end of the line to cap that off as well, because we're almost at the end of our time. Yolande, sorry. You were moving from that lull into the time.
It's the same, the collection of all the ideas. So that's like the building of material. So you build lots of material that is going to help tell your story. It's connected to your ideas. And then you have way too much material usually, and it's that, it's finding the shapes and it's peeling back the layers to then let the truth shine through, I guess, so it's simplifying, and
for the novelist. Then, before you were saying how much you enjoyed that lull state, Trent, and want to stay in it, I do too. I often feel like after you've produced some writing in the lull state, you think you're a genius. But then you wake up and you read it the next day and you discover you're actually a fraud. Because it hasn't found that language, that shared language.
You're so excited to get to your little writing, aren't you? And then you're just like,
there's no plot. It doesn't have a plot. So is that is that the kind of move towards the end of the process
Yeah,
from
for
there?
sure.
Is it the rewriting and the hammering of the executive kind of function over it,
Yeah.
and moving away from intuition a little bit?
Yeah, I always tell people, like, anything, you know, regarding creativity, first thing, finish it, you know, get it done, get that first draft done, or whatever it is, get it done, go to the end. Because that will be in that lull state. You know, I say to people in terms of novels, you know, the heart writes that first draft, you know, and then the head comes in. You know, just write with your heart first off, and just leave it all alone, because after that heart phase, then comes, for me, I've got 3 enemies, and one is big, which is my ego, and that's my biggest enemy, and as it's always questioning me, and I'm, you know, and that's what you're in battle against. Second, my tailbone, I get tailbone pain, and third is school pickup. So it's like there's just all these factors that are now you're battling, and you know the worst one is your own bloody insecurities, and you know, so that's when they kick in, but they can be good too, because those insecurities are keeping you sharp and honest. Your own fear brings the quality. So you know, your heart will bring the creativity.
Ben Quilty would agree with you, I think.
Yeah, well, that's how we open up the film, is talking about that battle with the ego and having to rein it in. And
Don't even get me started about ego.
To create art, you have to have a mix of ridiculous ego and really destructive self-doubt.
yeah.
Oh, man.
That's the opening quote.
Is that what he says?
Yeah.
I always
to me.
love that guy.
Talk to me.
I know it's that's
Which seems like I want to keep talking because I'm enjoying the conversation so much, but we do have a time limit. We should finish there. So I would like to thank you all for bringing your self-doubt, not your ego, but your incredible courage to the stage, for telling the stories that you do in the ways that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, it was amazing. Literally
thanks.
what he said, word for word. Incredible. Ben.
Can we get a big thank you for Stephen,
Yeah.
legendary writer, legendary Queensland writer. Yeah.
So the question for the room was, how do you schedule? How do you make time in your life for creativity, the way that you do, for exercise, for food, for pleasure? You've talked about, you know, car pickups.
I just think it's essential, and like I think you know, I think a lot of creative things that get done, maybe 60% of them are crap, but they're just done, and that person turned up and scheduled out their time to be creative. You know, it's like it's so important, because the good stuff comes just by sitting there and thinking, and it hasn't come. It's not going to fall from the sky. Sometimes it does, but it often comes. That's why Nick Cave rented out an office space. The guy lives in a mansion, but I have to get an office space, get on the bus, get on the subway, go to an office, and then sit and work.
Find a space. That's a space. Yolande, you have to balance, right, the archivist work. We have to pay bills. We all have to live. You know, how do you balance that time management question?
Oh, it's really tricky. I guess just living and seeing the world through creative eyes. I think having a child can help break down your common modalities through which you look at the world, you know, and I think that in itself can be quite inspirational, and there's a lot of imagery within that is untapped, because you sort of learn to turn the tap off and then they turn it on, you're like, whoa, you know.
I learned to compartmentalise time after becoming a parent. It's like they're just going to disrupt it, so you have to snatch stuff where you can get it. Like,
And for me, being a physical storyteller, it's also finding time to maintain my tool, which is my body, which is hard. So I feel like I have to always invest time in my fitness, because that's a great tool for me. But maybe that's because I'm used to having that as a tool, because I'm sure, you know, I know other people who work differently. But it's just saying yes to opportunities for me, because when the opportunities are there, I commit to them and follow through, and that's constantly keeping that part of me alive. So it's just saying yes.
how well does poetry pay, Huda?
Oh, not good at all. They need to step their game up a little bit. I have a terrible relationship with trying to structure my art time, but I learned that for me, it was a talent that I had to become turned into a skill. People don't pay me for talent. They don't care. Like, they'll come watch me for free, but they won't pay me. I have to be skilled. I had to be skilled as a performer, as a writer, like, you know, executing audiences and stuff. And I had to realize that for me, it was about training myself, that every opportunity is an opportunity to be creative, rather than going, I'm going to write from 11 to 12. I'm not that type of artist. I respect that discipline, but it's not who I am. But I'm always triggered. So like when I was watching the film, I write everywhere I am. Like something triggers my thought.
You were writing through that film.
Yeah, I write everywhere.
I thought you were
Wow.
texting.
No, I'm always writing. Random things like this provokes thought for me. Like this space, color, space, lighting, people's smiles. I'm about detail.
You're living in that lull phase.
Always.
Yeah.
I'm always art for me is my space.
Yeah.
Like I say I'm a master of my ecosystem, and I like to master ecosystem externally to be able to write about it. So my relationship with it is every opportunity for me is an opportunity to create. Every detail is worth me putting in my creation because then I can be of service to my art and then the stage that I'm on because I'm being authentic. So like, I hate it. I really do. Because there's sometimes I have shows where people are like, we want you to write about this. And I'm like, God damn it, I don't want to write about that. I really don't. But sometimes it's got to be done. And it's a good training tool to have that discipline. Because when you get into like battles, competitions, writing book, you start to have to do things that need to be done over the things that you want to do. And that's just a necessity in life. So I think it's a good skill to have in general. I still hate it though.
Catherine has a question.
I'd like to know how you regenerate. It sounds like you're always on. How do you get time to? Is there ever a real lull where you're not thinking about the creative process?
See, for me, art is not. It's not exhausting for me. That could be it. But like, I have moments where I gotta get it out moments, right? So those I gotta get it out moments are my performance times. But for me, art is an ability to see the world in a different lens. And I'm gonna be very vulnerable right now. I have a lot of trauma in my life. So for me, art is like a different pair of glasses to put on. So if anything, it's a lot of fun. Because I can walk into a space and be like, color, glasses, smiles, beard, hat. I like this. This is cool. I can paint pictures. But dance for me is actually the different outlet. So I'm a dance teacher outside. So when I'm done analyzing detail and having this like really intense present writing moment, I'm like, nah, I'm gonna play my favorite song and we're gonna just belt out a dance right here and it's so good. So I go from one to the other.
Are there other questions?
Don't be scared.
Don't be shy. Yeah, go for it. Oh, well, sorry, behind you and then you, sorry. How do you deal with creative block?
I'm easily stimulated, to be honest with you. So I'm easily provoked to write. I just keep writing. I have word vomit. I write shopping lists of emotions, and I just keep going through them. I don't ever think anything as a block. Sometimes it's a mental break. I start to switch perspective. So if my brain says, we don't want to write nothing, I just go, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Maybe we've done too much today. I don't take that as a rejection of my art. I'm not taking it as my art rejecting me to write it. I just go, okay, cool. Maybe my body needs time to regenerate and time to cool off. So learn to accept that writer's block is really just writer's break. And rewire that, and then you stop having a negative relationship with those moments where your truth has been spat out and it needs to be taken a break for you to exist, come back and write again. Because being artistic is for me, it's not a job, it's an expression. So if I don't have nothing to express, then what am I forcing it for? Just let it be.
Yolande, do dancers get dancers block?
Well, it's very collaborative. We work with music, we work with set design, we work with costumes, and we're honouring the story that we're telling. So you always go back to the story and the truth of what you're trying to communicate. And if there's a block there, then there's a team of people that maybe there's something you haven't thought about. And my partner's got great ideas. He builds sets and does all of that. So, and we're the exact opposite. So if I'm a bit feeling flat about something, then he'll have a really left of centre kind of spark that I'll be able to go, oh, okay, I didn't think of that. I don't know if I really like it, but yeah, maybe I could take something from that. I think it's talking to other people for me. It's very collaborative. And the dancers. Mm-hmm. The dancers give a lot to every show. And they're really the language which you're writing the story. It's their bodies, it's their facility, it's their life experiences, it's their age, it's their flexibility, it's their power, it's their size. It's all of those things are the tools which we communicate. So, yeah, it's very collaborative. So I think it's not as...
not as isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trent, do you keep writing?
Yeah. I jog. That's like I'll go for a jog. That's a really good one. But oftentimes this has happened to me where I've just writing this second novel I'm writing, and I've just finished. And but you're at this point where you forget that you're the architect. Like, so I remember just distinctly reaching this point in this real sort of final act kind of really tense scene in this book, and I'm like, I want this to happen, I want that to happen, but how do I get there? And you keep, like, I'm literally seeing the world in my head, and you like it's actually a physical place, like it's a place you can see, and then you go, hang on, I'm the designer, I built that world. You forget, you think that someone else did that for you in your head. You were the one who did it. And so you can always just go back and rebuild, and that's a really powerful thing to remember, is that you're the architect.
That is empowering. Rebuilding and rewiring are two phrases I'm hearing.
Oh,
there. So just going back and doing things that break the regular pattern. Do you relate to that process?
I do, but we're also a collaborative process. So I'm in an edit suite, and it's the most beautiful part of the process when you're with an editor, and my editor's also my cameraman. So that's the ultimate collaboration. And then we have a musician composer come on board as well. So, and she brings something, another.
I imagine deadlines help move a person through creative block pretty quickly.
We're pretty speedy.
Yeah.
Yep.
What was your question?
You sure your 10 minutes is not up?
Is my 10 minutes up?
We-
One quick question.
It's slightly different. It's after watching the film. Like, how does a creative person deal with criticism? Like, you think that you've put forward the best story, and then someone says, no, that's not good enough. And you go back, and like, how do you cope?
Great. The question for the room is, how do you deal with criticism, having put your work often in its very raw and fragile form, out into the public domain? Really, really quick. 10 seconds each. How do you deal with criticism? Catherine?
I find it interesting because you'll always get a different opinion from everybody, so it's fine. Yeah, I welcome negative as well as positive.
Yeah, I hate it. Like, it's terrible. I hate it. Just like it makes you queasy. But again, journalism is a great background for me. It's been a great thing. They used to have this thing literally called a spike, where they physically spiked your story and like, sorry, it's not going to get run. Like, spike.
That's Chad the Impaler.
Yeah, that's where Chad the Impaler came from. And
Physical too. That's traumatizing.
that really helps, and it's just you realising that there are people who do know their stuff, and just go, all right, just suck it up, and just go back to that computer and just try again. Yeah.
Yolande, how do you deal?
Listen to it. I think every bit of criticism comes from somebody's truth, and that's their truth. And that's interesting. It's great. So take it to mind, but don't take it to heart.
Thank you. Huda?
Immature response. I rant about it a lot and how I'm unhappy about that result. Mature response is I'm a big fan of like dialogue, like self-dialogue and changing words to languages of opportunity. To me, it's not criticism, it's feedback. Feedback is subjective. It's about perspective. And my performance and my style is multidimensional. So where I think I did phenomenally, other areas I might have done poorly. So you might be rating me for performance and speech. I did well in speech. I didn't perform very well. It's feedback. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I am not happy. Like, and I am not gonna lie about it. Like, I will have a great rant about how you are not shit, but I'll get back up and be like, cool, let's take it to a different stage and see what happens. So perspective.
Thank you. That is time.
Thank you guys. Thank you.